When I hear Mediterranean, I probably get the same images in my head that you do. Rocky islands surrounded by clear water, stone villas built into oceanside cliffs, maybe sun-drenched hillsides dotted with olive and juniper trees. These images, in my American expectation at least, are associated with Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, France. Imagine my surprise when I landed in Tunisia, a country in North Africa, and I was greeted by those same landscapes. Tunisia is the second most visited country in all of Africa, recording a close to 9 million entries in 2019. Creating over 92,000 jobs, its tourism industry made up almost 10% of its GDP in 2022. That number is expected to rise above 15% by 2025. This is largely due to the wide offering of unique destinations found in Tunisia. There's golden Mediterranean beaches, the dunes of the Sahara Desert. Cultural excursions include everything from ancient Roman sites to iconic Star Wars movie sets. Plenty of YouTubers have trekked across Tunisia's jagged countryside, tasted its food, and posted their stunning images. Yet with so much to see and do, it's hard to believe that Tunisia remains largely an unknown destination for Americans. There are projects addressing this issue, however. The US alone is investing $50 million into its Visit Tunisia campaign. This project is designed to bolster Tunisia's tourism sector as well, with a special interest in sustainable and ecotourism along with local operators. But there are others who are lending in their hand as well. Over the next few episodes of Multiply Tunisia, we'll focus in on those who are contributing to and being impacted by the ebbs and flows of the tourism here in Tunisia. As we tour around, we'll keep our focus on English, its importance to the sector, and how Tunisians are using it to keep up with all of those tourists. Multiply Tunisia's goal is to capture the entrepreneurial spirit of Tunisia by highlighting the influencers in its startup, social innovation, and artistic communities. We're also interested in tracking the growing impact of English on these sectors and the effects that this will have on Tunisia culture. First up, Oscar Scafidi. Oscar isn't Tunisian, but he recently published a Bradt Tour guide for Tunisia. I met up with Oscar in a busy streetside cafe to talk about his guide, his love for Tunisia, and how he set about creating the first English tour guide for Tunisia in over 10 years.
Excellent. Okay, so how did it come about? Rather randomly, to be honest. So when I originally moved to Tunisia in the summer of 2019, proposed to Bradt perhaps we should do a Tunisia guidebook. But yeah, when I first moved here, I just assumed there already was a guidebook because Tunisia gets a lot of tourists. It's one of the 10 most visited countries in Africa for tourists. So like in 2019, I think they got 9.4 million visitors. So my assumption was there will already be a Lonely Planet, there'll be a Rough guide, there's probably a Bradt guide. It was only when I looked on Amazon to actually buy myself one that I realized that the last editions of all of those were written in 2010, 2011. So a good decade out of date by the time I arrived. So for whatever reason, all of the English language guidebook publishers kind of gave up on Tunisia after the Arab Spring and the Tunisian Revolution. No one came back. So yeah, this is the first guidebook in 12 years, and it's likely to be the only English language guidebook for a long time because no one else is working on Tunisia at the moment.
When you came to Tunisia, you didn't come to Tunisia with this intention. You discovered this when you arrived.
That's correct, yeah.
So from an American perspective, because you obviously are not American, listen by your accent.
That is correct, yes.
When I tell other Americans and explain to them, number one, I live in Tunisia and that I have a business there, a company there, they immediately ask Siri, where is Tunisia? Is this the same for you, or did you have an understanding of Tunisia?
I had a better understanding of Tunisia because I think from a European perspective, most people know where Tunisia is because of the package holiday tourism that comes here. So you'll especially in the UK and in Italy actually, you'll bump into a lot of people who've been to Tunisia pre-revolution. So like, oh yeah, I went on a beach holiday to Sousse in 2005, that kind of thing. So I had friends who had been to Tunisia to go to the beach. And also, when I moved here, I actually had a very close friend of mine who was working at the British Embassy at the time. So I was able to get a little bit more information. I kind of knew what I was signing up for when I came out.
First impressions of Tunisia, yeah, like you land on the ground, like had you been here before?
No, I'd never been to Tunisia before. Haven't traveled that much around North Africa, to be honest. I've done a lot of travel in Morocco, but never been to Algeria, never been to Egypt. So yeah, I was quite surprised, to be honest. I was surprised by how European Tunis felt. On reflection, maybe that's not so surprising. I mean, it's incredibly close to Italy. You get a lot of cultural exchange with Italy and with France. But yeah, I think I was expecting it to feel more Middle Eastern, I suppose, and less Mediterranean. So that was the biggest thing that stood out for me.
So were you able to then, because I've heard you mention that you did your research, you asked local people, you got on Reddit, you got on different forums, Instagram, whatever, YouTube, Google, anything you could. The information that's out there currently about Tunisia is mostly in French. Are you finding this in English? How are you finding stuff?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff's in French. I speak French, so that's not too much of a problem. But really, I don't find it to be out there in any language, to be honest. Like, it was tough to do the research, and it's lucky I had so much help from people who are based here, and also a lot of Tunisians reached out. I'd say Reddit was one of my biggest sources of information and assistance, and the guidebook would be a lot shorter if it hadn't been for contributions from all the Tunisia subredditors.
When you're interacting with Tunisians, especially on Reddit, or when you find out there, are you interacting in French? Are you acting in Derja Arabic, English?
I don't speak Derja Arabic, so I've studied some modern standard, but certainly not good enough to have a complex conversation with somebody. So most of the interactions are in French or in English or in Italian. Kind of depends on the context.
Was any one of those that stand out more than other? Obviously, this is a French colony, so French is kind of like the go-to for Tunisians.
But actually, I'd say people want to move, especially young people, move away from French as quickly as they can if they're able to. So I'd find in a lot of cases I'd ask a question in French and they would respond in English because they'd realize that I'm not French.
And this wasn't like a Google Translate situation. This was them generally responding.
Yeah, this was them generally, because I think English is now a compulsory subject in the Tunisian state educational system. So you speak to anyone kind of below the age of about 35 and they've had some exposure to English at school. And that's another thing that really surprised me, actually, the overall level of English in the cities amongst the young people. I thought no one would speak English when I came here.
So then that level of English surprised you. Have you noticed an increase? Have you noticed anything, or is it just like, you're like, well, it's just as expected, these...
Yeah, I think over the past 3 years, I've been continuously surprised because the more I travel, the more I bump into people who can speak English in random parts of Tunisia. So, I mean, you'd expect it somewhere like Tunis or Sousse, that sort of thing. But, I've been all the way, I've been everywhere in Tunisia now, essentially, all 24 governorates, bumping into people who speak English in the strangest places. Yeah.
And so a pleasant surprise then, I mean,
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's a good thing from a Tunisian perspective. I mean, it improves your employment opportunities if you can speak multiple languages, which a lot of people here can. I mean, it's interesting because I see that debate online all the time, on Reddit especially. They talk about it a lot. They're like, can I get away with just speaking French if I'm trying to go and do a job in Canada or whatever it is? And the feedback more and more from Tunisians who've gone abroad, or even Tunisians who are starting things here, they're always like, no, like English is a must for international business, essentially.
So one of the reasons I reached out to you and just said thank you, I'm appreciative of your interview today, is just because what you're doing here, a project, is actually just promoting Tunisia. If you said that there's very little information that's really readily available, this is all a promotion project to a sense.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I see that even though like my normal aspect is like to go for Tunisians who are doing something in Tunisia, but even you are just doing something for the benefit of Tunisia. So number one, thank you. I really appreciate that. But number two, what was your favorite place in Tunisia? What was the place that stood out, or would you suggest to people?
I get asked that a lot. It's tough because it's such a varied country in terms of landscapes. I would say the northwest. So Kef, Siliana, Jendouba, Beja, that kind of sub-region. The main reason I say that is because that's the place that surprised me the most when I was traveling around, because I had certain pretty stereotypical preconceptions of what Tunisia looked like before I arrived. And the kind of two images in my head are the Sahara Desert and like beautiful Mediterranean beaches. So any landscape that was away from those two
So when you get
surprised
into
me.
Pine trees, mountains.
Yeah, pine trees, mountains, snow in the winter, that kind of thing. Not at all what I was expecting. And I love the great outdoors. I like to hike. I like to kayak. I like to run in nature, that sort of thing. So that place just seems perfect. It's one of the least promoted parts of the country. So it's actually the largest chapter in my guidebook. Yes.
And so that was intentional on that, is to...
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, what we're looking to do is the whole Bradt philosophy. We're looking at sustainable tourism, eco-tourism, getting off the beaten track. That's the name of the presentation I keep giving about this project.
I'm actually in my hand holding a physical copy of the book, Tunisia, the Bradt guide that's just here. We use this for promotion.
There it is, finally.
Is there any discussion, any debate in the world of evolving digital AI, all of this stuff that's here? Is there any debate what it is to actually print a paperback book and people actually put this in their backpack? What's the future of paperback when it comes down to guides and stuff like this?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because people now tend to rely more on their smartphones for travel information than they do a guidebook. And in a lot of the world, you can get away with that. Obviously, if I was going to go to Paris or something, I don't think I'd buy a guidebook. I'd just start looking on TripAdvisor and Instagram, and I'd find everything I wanted that way. But there are some places like Tunisia where that's extremely difficult, especially if you don't speak the language. So I think there's still a future for it. And also, whenever Bradt do surveys and ask people, would you prefer a print version or a digital version? It's almost unanimous. Everyone wants a print version, and I'm the same. I use my Kindle to read just regular books that you read front to back. I never use my Kindle for a guidebook because obviously you want to be able to flick back and forth. I like to be able to draw on it and have the maps and things. So I think there is still a future for it. Yeah, it's still useful, but it's kind of shrinking. As the internet expands and that sort of thing, it's shrinking more and more.
Well, as a case example, how many places did you go to that Google said, yes, 5-star rating, da-da-da-da-da-da, but then you go there and find barred doors, everything shut?
So many. And I mean, part of that was to do with a lot of businesses here not having a very clear web presence. Part of it was also to do with COVID. A lot of places mothballed during the pandemic or they went out of business. So yeah, I went to a lot of places where I was kind of frustrated because it was closed.
Do you then have a plan or a project, if you will, to update, to keep things current? Is there anything set in the works for that? Or is this just a standalone 2022 or 2023, this is what you get, good luck to the future?
No, so all of my social media is mapped into this guidebook. So I have an official Twitter account for the guidebook, Bradt Tunisia. So I will tweet out when new places open or when old places close. Another thing I've done, this is a fully multimedia guidebook. So there's over 100 YouTube videos QR coded into the guidebook. So as you go through, you can get your smartphone out, point it at and we've got hotel reviews, museum tours, anything that people might find interesting.
Anything for a new tourist who's never heard, an English-speaking tourist coming to Tunisia, do you have a bit of advice? 1, 2, maybe 3 points, just to kind of help them just be prepared for this country and things that they should do?
Yeah, I've put a bit of advice in the front actually, and I think the main one that I end up giving to a lot of my friends is not to be too ambitious with your itinerary that you put together. So I've got a lot of people, their natural inclination is to see some of the main sites and then go, okay, how do I thread this together into a 7-day itinerary? And they just end up spending a lot of their time in Tunisia driving. I mean, the roads are good quality. They're not potholed or anything like that, so you can get around quickly. Try to avoid too much driving, and one way you can do that is by booking kind of a one-way itinerary where you fly into one airport and out of another, and with a one-way vehicle rental as well, or getting a driver, because otherwise, you're going to be shooting past a lot of places that might be worth stopping in. And also, I'd say choose the time that you come carefully. Obviously, there's vast temperature variations between the regions. Think carefully about the weather when you're planning.
One question, is this all first-hand knowledge, or is there any second-hand references that you just...
just kind of copied and pasted off Wikipedia, yeah. It's all first-hand knowledge in the sense that I've been to all the places that I say that I've been to, and I have an author's recommended symbol. Everything I've recommended, I've done. So I've eaten at that restaurant, I've stayed in that hotel, I've had that experience. But it's not just my voice in the book. There's a lot of other voices as well, and you'll see they're actually highlighted when it's somebody else writing. So, for example, I have World War II battlefield expert called Trevor Sheehan, who runs an organization called African Stalingrad, and he does battlefield tours of Tunisia because the Tunis campaign in World War II was quite significant. So if you're interested in World War II, Tunisia is a key place. So yeah, he's written sections on the battlefields. I went there and got the GPS tags and whatever, but it's his information in there. And likewise, I have sections written on Jewish history, written by other people, traveling with children, obviously not an experience that I've had. So I had that written by a friend of mine who's here with 2 children. The section on women's safety, for example, has obviously female perspectives because things are very different for me than they would be for a female visitor. So yeah, there's a lot of different voices have gone into it.
The last question, finish it off. What is your favorite Tunisian food?
Ooh, that's a good question. Tuna brick, high up there. You have to like tuna if you live in this country. Luckily, I already like tuna. So that's up there. Let's have a think. Probably grilled octopus, something like that, like in Kakena, like some of the seafood down there.
Well, Oscar, thank you for the book. Thank you for the promotion. Thank you for putting Tunisia on the map, as it were. And we're glad you're back here for these couple of days and enjoy and all that stuff. So again, just thank you for everything you've done, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing it with everybody.
Multiply Tunisia is brought to you by 11 Talents. At 11 Talents, we consult, design, and multiply. Find out more by following us on our Facebook page, our Instagram feed, or by visiting our website at 11talents.com. At 11 Talents, we start with you. Multiply Tunisia.